Hominy is a corn product that's older than the colonies themselves. It's one of those foods that crossed cultural boundaries between native and European, and then it kind of took on a life of its own. Today on the Deerskin Diary, I'm going to show you how I made hominy with wood ashes, water, and corn, and then a frontier trail-style dish that I made from that same hominy. So stick around. I'm going to show you how this cornerstone ingredient created a cornucopia of dishes during the era of the tricorn. Yes! Corn is a descendant of grass which is not easily digested by humans. It basically passes right through us in an unprocessed state. Nixtamalization is the process where the grains of corn are soaked in lye, and this chemically alters the grain, getting rid of the plasticky outside called the pericarp, and it releases essential vitamins that are stored within the kernel. Now, no one really knows where this process came from, but we know that it's at least thousands of years old in Central and South America. Now there, the process of making hominy seemed to focus on flours for making breads, like tortillas that we know today. But in the American Southeast, it seems to have typically been used in something more like a soup or a stew. The use of lye or alkaline solutions to cook and preserve was not just relegated to the New World. This process also existed in Scandinavia in a dish called lutefisk, and in Asia with the 1,000-year-old egg. Processing corn into hominy became a distinct American dish that was popular well into the 20th century, but it's its popularity in the 18th century, and specifically as a frontier-esque style dish that we're focused on today. In terms of native cultures, James Adair, describing an indigenous culture that he lived with, explained that, quote, corn is their chief produce and main dependence. Of this they have 3 sorts, one of which hath already been mentioned. The second sort is yellow and flinty, which they call hominy corn. The third is the largest, of a very white and soft grain, termed bread corn. In 1792, a Mohawk woman named Cuckoo Chi had moved from Montreal to the Shawnee country in Ohio. Her home was described by captive Oliver Spencer as, quote, her household furniture consisted of a large brass kettle for washing and sugar making, a deep, close-covered copper hominy kettle, a few knives, tin cups, pewter and horn spoons, sieves, wooden bowls, and baskets of various sizes. Now remember that all of history is an interaction between cultures and landscapes, and cultures with other cultures within that landscape. And you see cultures kind of taking or borrowing things from one another and discarding things that don't work anymore. Corn's an excellent example of this. Corn becomes a staple of a European diet along the American frontier, particularly in the South, where it becomes a strong substitute for wheat flour, and hominy does the same thing. Hominy is a corn product that is adapted by Europeans, and it becomes extremely popular in traditional Southern foods. In 1728, William Byrd stated that he ate, quote, hominy tossed up with butter and sugar. In Mark Baker's iconic work, Sons of a Trackless Forest, he includes a Longhunter supply list from 1768 that has luxivated corn as one of the items taken with them. Now, there's no good definition for luxivated in the 21st century, but there is a good definition for lixivate. It's only changing one letter, and to lixivate means to extract a constituent from a solid mixture using percolation or washing, and that very well describes the hominy making process. So while it's not definitive, I think the evidence is pretty strong that that could have been hominy. Joseph Doddridge stated that, quote, hog and hominy were proverbial for the dish of which they were the component parts. But it doesn't stop with Europeans. Hominy becomes an active ingredient in African American diets as well, where hog and hominy become pretty well synonymous with what we now know as soul food. And on the eve of the American Civil War, the state of Tennessee was even referred to as the hog and hominy state. To make this hominy, you're going to want to use a non-reactive pot. So that's typically going to be something that's tin lined. So brass, copper, and cast iron are all considered reactive with acids and with alkaline solutions, in this case, that are used to make the hominy. But this is the deerskin diary. We're going to use an unlined brass trade kettle because there were so many of them throughout the frontier, and hominy seems to be such a common dish that I feel quite certain that, that hominy was made in some of these brass kettles. And the description from Cuckoo Cheese House, we know that she used a copper kettle to make the hominy. So we're going to see how this works out. The only thing that I think we really have to worry about is over a long period of time, a strong alkali solution can actually extract the zinc from inside the brass alloy, but I just don't think that's going to happen in the grand total of this experiment. Here you can see the final hominy product. Now we started out with these dried grains of purple corn. I used purple because it was the closest thing I could get to an Eastern style blue corn. And about halfway to 3/4 of the way through the cooking process, you can see the grain swells and this plastic pericarp starts to come off. Now, as the grain swells even more, you get to this stage where this plasticky pericarp comes off much easier and the grain becomes swollen and even a little bit mushy. That's when you know it's finished. Now I've rinsed this through several changes of clean water. Again, a little ash or alkaline solution won't hurt you, but a lot certainly could. So I've just continually rinsed this through fresh water and fresh water and fresh water until I feel like that's enough. All right, the finished hominy itself, a lot of depth to the corn flavor. A little bit of the smoke from the wood ash, not a ton. It's slightly different than your typical maza flavor from like a corn tortilla or a corn chip, but it's definitely there. It's just more subtle and more in the background. And I actually prefer this more than the more modern produced hominy or maza flour that's used, you know, usually a culinary lime or something like that. This wood ash definitely imparts its own unique flavor. What we're going to do now is take this hominy and add it to our simmering pork bacon over there to make hog and hominy. Now for this dish, I'm making bacon and hominy because it shows the mixture of the European processed bacon with the native processed hominy. So I'm using about 1.5 cups to 2 cups of cooked hominy with as much bacon as I felt like adding. All right, here we have it, hog and hominy, this European Native American fusion dish. I mean, who doesn't like bacon, right? But cooking the bacon in the water first really released some of that smoky flavor and certainly that salt and the fat, which then imparted itself into the hominy itself, the fat coating the kernels and really making a hearty meal. The corn itself, I mean, It tastes more like corn to me than regular corn. I have a chef friend who taught me how to cook carrots one time by cooking them in carrot juice with some ginger. And the end product in my mind tasted more like carrots than an actual carrot. This is very much the same way. And this is an extremely hearty meal as well. Like this amount right here would probably be enough, certainly for me to have. And then there's some leftovers there as well to finish later, maybe for breakfast. Always a hair in your history camp meals. Hominy is a food product that directly bridges the gap between ancient native practices and European expansion in America. These swelled kernels and the process it took to make them have become a part of American cuisine even today. On the frontier, they were as ubiquitous as powder horns and hunting shirts. Now, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you spending your time with me as we explore this maze that we call the American frontier. We'll see you next time on the Deerskin Diary.